After doing a video explaining that capitalism doesn't actually promote innovation, it stifles it, and the public sector is basically behind all technological advances since, ever, be it direct government or military projects or funding through grants that go to universities to do research. And all capitalism does is take those inventions and those advancements and repackage them and sell them back to us with the sole purpose of making a profit, which almost never results in innovation. Usually just results with them doing everything they can to kill competition and any new innovation so they don't have to spend any money on R&D to make a better product. And somebody asked what the solution was, how we move away from that into a more equitable economy with more public investment in that economy. And I've been over this before, and the big, complicated, long drawn-out answer is to tax the fucking rich. Corporate greed, wealth hoarding, and the lack of innovation in the private sector is not a new problem, and it doesn't require a new solution. See, contrary to popular belief, higher tax loads don't actually stifle innovation, they promote it. We know that given the option, rich people don't actually reinvest their money, they pocket those profits, they redistribute those profits to shareholders. But if you increase their marginal tax rates, you force them to make the decision of giving the government a portion of those profits or reinvesting those profits into their business in the form of R&D and wage increases and infrastructure investment and using those investments as a tax write-off. Now, obviously, it makes a lot more sense because when they reinvest that money into their business, they're still keeping those profits in the form of equity and advancement in the company. This is why during the great economic booms of the 50s and 60s, when tax rates were at 90% for a top marginal tax rate, they weren't actually paying that 90% tax rate. They were just actually reinvesting their profits into R&D, and they were innovating a little bit. They were paying people decent wages and giving them pensions. Shareholder value was created through equity rather than shareholder returns. So that's the first thing. Then we need to make sure that we have competition in the market, which is just enforcing antitrust laws, not allowing major companies to buy up all their competition so they have no reason to innovate, because what drives innovation is the fact that they need to make a product that's better than somebody else's so you'll actually buy it. And the only motivation they have to actually innovate to do that is if other people are making similar products that are just as good or better, and they need to compete for your business by making better products. And as much as I rag on capitalism, there is certain things that free market capitalism is good for. Creating convenience products, luxury products, your toasters and your televisions and stuff like that. Because even though everything on your iPhone was pretty much developed or invented by the government or with government funding and grants, a private market profit motivation to package it all into a phone and sell it to people is a good thing that the government probably wouldn't have gotten around to quite as quickly. See, the government is really good at innovating specific technologies and creating programs that help people, but they're bad at responding to market shifts. And for everything to be completely publicly owned, you have to have a planned economy. And planned economies usually end up with a lot of oversupply in certain places and undersupply in other places because they can't respond quickly enough. Private sector free market capitalism is a great filler for those markets. But the private sector really falls apart when profit isn't an effective motive to provide the services, the technology, or the innovations that we need. Healthcare, education, housing, feeding people, all of those things should be partially publicly controlled, because whether you can afford it or not, you deserve to have all of those things. And when people do have all of those things, they become better contributing members of society who are more innovative and pay more taxes and earn more money and consume more, which is good for free market capitalism. But at the point of entry, there isn't always a profit to be made for those things, and the private sector won't touch them. They aren't going to house the homeless. They aren't going to feed the hungry. They'd much prefer to exploit college students with predatory lending than see them get a decent education so they can become better functioning members of society. So if the motivation should be people and not profit, it should never be privatized. And my hot take on all this is that should extend to the energy markets. We already subsidize the shit out of oil and gas to try to keep prices stable because energy is essential to all of our lives. In reality, it's nearly as essential as food and shelter. It's how we get to work to pay for food and shelter. It's how we keep our homes warm in the winter and cool in the summer. Energy is how the entire world moves. And to try to manage that, we give energy companies across the board, whether it's power companies or oil companies or even solar and wind companies, massive amounts of subsidies. And then they take that money and they do what private companies do best. They pocket as much of it as possible and spend the rest on lobbying and buying up the competition to make sure that they aren't forced to innovate and they can keep selling us the same outdated products that are killing our planet. And then you end up with power grids like you have in Texas that fail because they get a cool breeze one day, all because the privatized power industry there decided that instead of winterizing their power grid, they were going to give that money back to shareholders. And then you know what? So what if grandma freezes to death? So energy should be publicly owned as well because it is essential for people to survive. And then that brings us to our last solution, which is public investment, which becomes a lot easier when these things are publicly owned because then the people running these particular departments that manage these systems can identify a problem, like we need to cure cancer or fix heart disease, or we need more stable, secure, reliable, renewable energy. And without a profit motive, they can lay out the best way to achieve those goals, petition the government for it, and then in theory, we as the people can vote on the things that we want to see happen, even if that is in proxy through our Congress people and representatives voting on those things. And then once those projects move forward, the money that we are spending on it is actually being spent on that R&D and hiring the best people for the job, and not figuring out how to funnel as much of it as possible into the pockets of a few rich assholes. So in short, higher taxes on corporations and the wealthy, enforcing antitrust laws, nationalizing or making public of certain industries and markets, and investing our tax dollars, our money, in the places where we need to find solutions to problems. Basically, just do the same shit that literally every other industrialized country on the planet does. It's not complicated. Lots of places have figured it out, and there's no reason that we can't either. But those solutions start with voting this November. So make sure you get to the polls and vote for the changes that you want to see in the future. Because whether we believe it or not, the solution starts with us.